The Wyoming air before dawn carried a chill, almost glacial, even at this time of year. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, shifting from deep indigo to a pale, washed-out gray, with the faintest pink fringe kissing the horizon. Along a desolate stretch of Highway 80, lost among rolling hills and sparse copses of trees, an unnerving silence held sway, broken only by the soft whisper of wind through dry grass and the low crackle of commands over the radio. An FBI task force, commanded by Special Agent David Carter, was moving into position. Carter, a man of 45 with weary eyes and hard lines etched around his mouth, personally checked his agents' placements. A dozen agents clad in dark tactical vests over nondescript clothing melted into the pre-dawn twilight on either side of the road. Two unmarked vehicles were parked at an angle, ready to block passage. Several miles further down the highway, deputies from the local sheriff's office had closed the road, creating an artificial traffic jam under the guise of road work. The operation to intercept the drug cartel convoy had been months in the planning. The intelligence came from a reliable source. The details cross-verified countless times. They expected a convoy of 3 or 4 SUVs and 1 truck, transporting a major shipment of cocaine from Mexico to the northern states. Carter rubbed his stiff neck. Despite the meticulous planning, a gnawing anxiety lingered. Everything looked too clean on paper. Around 6 a.m., as the first rays of sunlight touched the hilltops, painting them in hues of orange and red, a spotter reported over the radio. Target approaching. 4 SUVs, 1 truck, moving at estimated speed. Carter gave a curt nod to himself, his fingers tightening on the grip of his service pistol. "Everyone get ready! Execute the plan!" The convoy appeared around a bend. Leading the way was a massive black SUV with tinted windows, followed by 2 older models, and bringing up the rear, a large box truck. They approached steadily, not slowing down. Suddenly, less than 200 yards from the interception point, the lead SUV accelerated sharply. Simultaneously, the barrels of automatic weapons emerged from the windows of all the vehicles. The deafening roar of gunfire shattered the morning quiet. Bullets hammered against the bodies of the FBI vehicles, striking sparks. The agents returned fire. The plan collapsed in the first few seconds. The criminals had been ready for the ambush. Their weaponry was far more powerful than anticipated, not just pistols and shotguns, but assault rifles. A heavy machine gun, mounted in the bed of one of the rear SUVs, began spraying lead across the FBI positions. A leak, the thought flashed through Carter's mind as he ducked behind his vehicle, feeling shards of glass graze his cheek. The firefight escalated into a fierce battle, the air filled with the acrid smell of cordite, the cries of the wounded, and the shriek of metal. The FBI agents, despite the surprise attack and the enemy's superior firepower, acted professionally. They laid down methodical fire, aiming to disable the convoy's engines and tires. One of the cartel SUVs, trailing smoke, veered onto the shoulder. Men spilled out, continuing to fire. The truck, its radiator punctured multiple times, ground to a halt in the middle of the highway. But the lead SUV, black and armored, continued its relentless advance. It rammed one of the FBI vehicles, tossing it aside like a toy. Bullets ricocheted off its reinforced windows and bodywork. Carter saw one of his younger agents attempting to throw a spike strip under the vehicle, cut down by a burst of machine gun fire. Another agent crumpled beside him. There were losses on both sides. Several cartel gunmen lay motionless on the asphalt, but the armored SUV didn't stop. It broke through a weak point in the makeshift cordon and, swerving sharply off the highway, sped down a barely visible gravel road leading towards the dense forest and foothills. Carter swore through clenched teeth, feeling a sharp pain in his left arm. A bullet had grazed his forearm, leaving a ragged tear. Block the road. Get medics. All wounded take cover. He yelled into the radio, grabbing it with his good hand. He saw two surviving FBI vehicles peel out in pursuit of the escaping SUV, but quickly realized they couldn't catch it on the rough gravel track. Control, Carter reporting. Main body of the convoy neutralized. Cargo secured. We have casualties, minimum 2 agents, KIA, multiple wounded. Target Alpha lead SUV, armored, unknown number of occupants, presumed leader aboard. Broke through and is heading north on a secondary road into the forest. Request immediate air support and containment of all exits from the area. Inside the black SUV, bouncing violently over the rough terrain, the tension was thick. Rico, a man in his 50s with a hard face and cold eyes, was behind the wheel. Beside him, pressed into the seat, sat his son Marco, a pale teenager of about 17. 7 more gunmen occupied the rear seats. One of them groaned softly, clutching a wound in his side. "They knew, boss," one of the gunmen rasped. "It was a setup." Rico nodded curtly, his eyes fixed on the track ahead. "I can see that. Shut up." He knew they were cornered. The highway was blocked. Pursuit was surely already underway. Staying in the vehicle was too risky. As soon as they were deep enough into the woods to be hidden from the air, they'd have to ditch the truck. He glanced at his son. Marco was trying to appear calm, but his trembling hands betrayed his fear. Rico clenched his jaw. The priority was saving his son, and himself. He wrenched the wheel hard, turning off the gravel track directly into the dense woods, smashing through bushes and young saplings. Get ready to move out. Grab all weapons, ammo, and water. Now. The heavy SUV pushed through the forest for another 3 miles or so, leaving a trail of broken branches and crushed undergrowth, before Rico slammed on the brakes in a small clearing, shielded from the sky by the dense canopy of pines. Out. Move. His voice was sharp, demanding immediate obedience. 9 men tumbled out of the vehicle, gulping the fresh forest air, thick with the scent of pine and gasoline. They moved quickly, almost automatically, hauling bags of weapons, crates of ammunition, several water canisters, and meager food supplies, energy bars and jerky from the SUV. One of the gunmen, limping and grimacing in pain, leaned against a tree, his shirt soaked with blood. Rico shot him a brief glance. Patch him up and keep him quiet. While 2 others clumsily bandaged their wounded comrade, the rest began camouflaging the vehicle. They broke off branches, covering the gleaming black bodywork and tires, trying to make the SUV as invisible as possible from the air. When they finished, Rico gestured with his hand. "We move out." North. The group plunged deeper into the forest, immersing themselves in the quiet gloom of the undergrowth. The going was tough. Roots snagged their feet, branches clawed at their clothes, and the air grew heavier, more humid. The wounded gunmen significantly slowed their pace, each step an obvious effort despite the support of 2 companions. Tension mounted with every yard covered. Whispers started, then quiet arguments. Someone suggested leaving the wounded man behind. Rico cut him off sharply. "Shut your mouth. We don't leave our own. We stick together or we die out here alone. Move." His authority still held, but he could feel fear and exhaustion eroding discipline. He kept glancing back, straining to hear any sound from the forest, listening for the beat of helicopter blades or the barking of dogs. For now it was quiet, miles to the north, at the secluded Quiet Creek Ranch. Life followed its usual rhythm, at least on the surface. John Caldwell, a sturdy man around 50 with a weathered face and calm gray eyes, was checking the fence line of the far pasture with his eldest son, Michael. Michael, 25, was tall and broad-shouldered, moving with confident strength. They worked in silence, replacing rotten posts and tightening barbed wire. Near the main house, a large but somewhat weathered structure of dark timber, Eliza Caldwell, John's wife, hung laundry on the line. Her face, once beautiful, now bore the imprint of constant worry. She glanced occasionally towards her younger son, 18-year-old Caleb, who was awkwardly trying to help old Hank, the ranch hand, and his son, Pete, herd calves into a pen. Caleb was thinner and shorter than Michael, his movements jerky and nervous. The Caldwell's daughter, 16-year-old Sarah, sat on the porch with a book, but her eyes too often strayed towards her younger brother. An atmosphere of solidarity and familiar routine hung over the ranch, but beneath the surface, a hidden tension simmered. It emanated from Caleb. He was clearly on edge, irritable, snapping at Pete's harmless comments, his hands trembling slightly. During a short lunch break, he barely touched his food. John and Michael exchanged brief, understanding glances across the table. Eliza placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "It'll be all right, honey. You just need to keep it together. A few more days." Caleb jerked his shoulder away, shrugging off her hand. "I know," he snapped, pushing back from the table and walking out. His first full night, the night of the full moon, was approaching. Only 3 days remained. Rico's group had been walking for hours. The sun climbed high, but under the dense canopy, twilight lingered. Water supplies in their canteens were running low. The wounded man had weakened considerably. They practically had to carry him. Finally, they reached a small creek with clear, cold water. Rico allowed a short break. While the others drank greedily and splashed water on their faces, he unfolded a makeshift map he'd grabbed from the SUV, an old topographical chart of the area, covered in his own markings. He tried to pinpoint their location. Based on the map and their direction, they were several miles south of the foothills, in a region of extensive forests dotted with isolated farms. "We need shelter," he told his men as they gathered around him. "We can't keep going like this. The wounded man won't make it. We need food, water, and a place to lay low for at least a couple of days, until the feds ease up the search." He stabbed a finger at a point on the map. About 5 or 6 miles north, there should be some kind of dwelling. An old road led there, maybe a farm or a ranch. We head there. By evening, utterly exhausted, they had almost reached their destination. The forest began to thin, revealing open country ahead. After a few hundred more yards, they emerged at the edge of the woods. Below, nestled in a small valley, lay a ranch. A main house, several barns and outbuildings, corrals for livestock. Lights glowed in the house windows. Quiet Creek Ranch looked secluded, almost cut off from the rest of the world. the perfect place for a temporary refuge. Rico scanned the valley intently. "Looks like we got lucky," he said quietly. "We rest for an hour, until it's fully dark. Then we move in. No noise." A cold calculation gleamed in his eyes. These people would have everything they needed. Food, shelter, and maybe transportation. And most importantly, silence. He would make sure of that. Deepening twilight draped the valley in a soft gray blanket, blurring the sharp outlines of the hills and the buildings of Quiet Creek Ranch. Only the warm yellow rectangles of the main house windows and a single bare bulb above the barn entrance broke the monochrome landscape. Rico's group, leaving the wounded man with one guard hidden at the edge of the woods, moved cautiously towards the ranch, using the uneven terrain and the shadows of scattered trees for cover. 8 dark figures advanced silently, like ghosts, their eyes scanning the area. Rico signaled his men to halt about 100 yards from the nearest structure, a large barn. He raised a small pair of binoculars and began carefully studying the situation. Silhouettes moved within the main house windows. A man and a woman, likely the owners, sat at a table in a large room, perhaps a living room or kitchen. 2 younger people, a young man and a girl, were also there. 2 older men emerged from the barn and headed towards the house, apparently finished with evening chores. Rico counted 6 people. There might be more, but he couldn't see them now. He quickly assessed the layout. Main house, barn, several smaller sheds, corrals. One entrance to the house was brightly lit, but there was another, on the rear side, shrouded in shadow. The distances between buildings were significant, roughly 30 to 40 yards. Rico lowered the binoculars. The plan formed instantly. Fast, hard, minimal noise. He quietly issued commands, dividing his men into 2 teams. 4, including himself and Marco, would approach the main house from 2 sides, 2 to the front entrance, 2 to the rear. The other 3 were to silently neutralize the 2 men walking from the barn and then check the barn and sheds for anyone else. Move on my signal. No shooting unless absolutely necessary. We need hostages, not corpses. Marco, stay close to me. Minutes later, everyone was in position. Rico raised his hand, then dropped it sharply. Instantly, 3 figures darted towards the 2 ranch hands walking towards the house. A short, almost silent struggle, a rifle butt blow, a swift takedown, and both men were on the ground, hands bound, mouths gagged. They were quickly dragged into the barn's shadow. Simultaneously, Rico's team rushed the house. 2 gunmen kicked in the front door and burst inside, yelling, "Everybody down! Don't move!" Rico and Marco entered through the back door, which was unlocked, surprising Eliza Caldwell as she cleared the table. The Caldwell family was caught completely off guard. John instinctively lunged towards the wall where an old rifle hung above the fireplace, but a heavy blow to his back sent him sprawling. Michael tried to shield his mother and sister, but the muzzle of an assault rifle pressed against his forehead froze him in place. Sarah screamed and shrank into a corner. Caleb stood rigid in the middle of the room, his eyes wide. But beneath the fear, something else flickered. Dark, almost feral. It was over in seconds. The gunman moved with swift, brutal efficiency. Soon, everyone from the house, John, Eliza, Michael, Caleb, Sarah, along with Hank and Pete brought from the barn, were herded into the living room. 7 people in total. Rico stood before them, his face an impassive mask. Listen carefully. His voice was low but commanding. We just need temporary shelter, food, water, and your silence. We don't want to hurt anyone. But if anyone tries anything stupid, the consequences will be severe." He placed a hand on Marco's shoulder, who stood beside him. "This is my son. If a single hair on his head is harmed because of you, you will all die. Do you understand me?" The hostages remained silent, their faces a mixture of terror and shock. John Caldwell, slowly getting up from the floor and clutching his back, took a step forward. "We understand. We won't cause trouble. Take what you need. Just don't hurt my family." His voice trembled, but he tried to speak firmly. Rico nodded. "Good. Keep cooperating, and it stays that way." Meanwhile, the gunmen quickly searched the house. They found food stores in the kitchen, medical supplies in the bathroom. One attended to their wounded comrade, who had been brought in from the woods. All telephones, the landline and any cell phones found on the hostages, were collected and smashed. Rico personally checked the windows and doors, ordering guards posted at the main entrance and the back door. Quiet Creek Ranch was now completely cut off from the outside world. A oppressive silence descended on the living room. The hostages sat on the sofa and the floor under the watchful eyes of two guards. Eliza quietly held a weeping Sarah. John stared straight ahead, his face stony. Hank and Pete sat with bowed heads. Michael and Caleb sat side by side. Michael put a hand on his brother's shoulder, trying to calm him, but felt the muscles bunched tight beneath his touch. He met Caleb's gaze. In his younger brother's eyes swirled not only panic, but a dark, barely contained fury. One of the guards, a young man with a sneering face named Chucky, noticed the look. He smirked and gestured with his rifle towards Caleb. "What are you staring at, kiddo? Scared?" Caleb didn't answer, just clenched his fists tighter. Only 2 days remained until the full moon. They were trapped as human captives of armed men and as beings whose ancient secret was under deadly threat of exposure. The first night of captivity promised to be long and agonizing. At dawn the next day, the stretch of Highway 80 was still a scene of controlled chaos. Agent Carter, his arm bandaged, wearily watched his team and the arriving forensic specialists at work. The shootout site was cordoned off for miles in both directions. Agents in white hazmat suits methodically collected evidence. Shell casings of various calibers, glass fragments, blood samples, discarded weapons. Photographers documented every detail. The bodies of the dead 2 FBI agents and 6 cartel members had already been bagged and were being prepared for transport to the morgue. Preliminary identification of the dead gunmen and analysis of their weapons and tactics quickly confirmed the initial assessment. This was a well-organized group linked to a major Mexican drug cartel. The truck, stopped during the firefight, had been opened. Inside, they found over a ton of high-purity cocaine packed in bricks. The operation was a significant success, but marred by casualties and, most disturbingly, the escape of the leader. Carter interviewed the wounded agents who were able to speak. Their accounts were consistent. A sudden, overwhelming attack, powerful weaponry, the armored SUV breaching the cordon. The possibility of an information leak seemed increasingly likely. While the forensics team worked the scene, the FBI launched a full-scale manhunt. Helicopters equipped with thermal imagers took to the air, scanning the forested area where the SUV had disappeared. Top K9 units were brought in, multiple teams with dogs trained to track human scent. Reinforced roadblocks were established on every road and dirt track within a 50-mile radius of the breakout point. Information about the fugitives. Description of the SUV, estimated number. 8 to 9 men, including 1 wounded. Their armament was immediately disseminated to all police departments and sheriff's offices in the surrounding counties. Agents began methodically questioning residents of the few remote farms and forestry workers, showing photos of the dead gunmen and asking about any suspicious vehicles or individuals seen in the last 24 hours. Around noon, the first piece of encouraging news arrived. The crew of a helicopter, flying over a dense section of forest about 15 miles north of the highway, spotted vehicle tracks leading into the woods and something resembling a camouflaged object beneath the trees. A ground team with K9 units was immediately dispatched. An hour later, confirmation came. They had found the armored black SUV, matching the description of the fugitive's vehicle. It was empty and carefully concealed with branches. The dogs immediately picked up a scent trail leading north from the vehicle, deeper into the forest. The search area narrowed considerably. Carter ordered the main effort concentrated in that quadrant. Agents began combing the woods, following the trail left by the criminals. At Quiet Creek Ranch, the second day of captivity unfolded under a pall of fear and uncertainty. The criminals, settling in slightly, tried to establish a semblance of order that suited them. Rico understood they couldn't let the ranch appear deserted. At gunpoint, he forced Eliza and Sarah to cook meals for everyone. John, Michael, Hank, and Pete were taken outside to perform essential chores, feeding livestock, fetching water. Every move was monitored by armed guards. Rico strictly forbade anyone from approaching the road or attempting to signal for help. However, despite the enforced calm, some of the gunmen began noticing oddities. While carrying heavy sacks of feed, Michael Caldwell lifted them with an ease that seemed unnatural, even for a strong rancher. The younger one, Caleb, remained unnervingly intense, his eyes sometimes flashing with something wild, almost inhuman, especially when he looked at his captors. And while searching a storeroom for extra supplies, one of the gunmen noted the unusually large quantity of frozen meat packed into a huge chest freezer. Whispers started among the gunmen, along with wary glances directed at the ranch family. Rico felt the mounting tension. He tried to pry information about the area from John Caldwell. Were there other farms nearby? Any hidden trails or roads leading out of the valley? Did they know locals who might notice their absence and raise the alarm? John answered evasively in monosyllables, citing the ranch's isolation and his poor memory. He was clearly trying to protect his family and perhaps something else. Rico didn't trust him. Meanwhile, the FBI agents, slowly but surely following the trail from the abandoned SUV, reached the edge of the forest. Analyzing the map and the fugitives' direction of travel, Carter concluded they were likely seeking shelter at one of the isolated farms or ranches marked in the area. Quiet Creek Ranch was the closest and most probable candidate. He requested additional intel on the property. Air surveillance earlier in the day had reported a lack of visible activity at the ranch, somewhat strange for working hours, and noted that shutters on some main house windows were closed despite the clear day. Carter's suspicions hardened. He ordered one of the search teams to move towards the ranch for reconnaissance, but to proceed with extreme caution. The net around Quiet Creek was beginning to tighten. The FBI team, personally led by David Carter, reached high ground overlooking the valley containing Quiet Creek Ranch. The sun was sinking towards the west, casting long shadows across the land. Carter didn't order an immediate assault. Something about the stillness of the place felt wrong, unnerving. Using powerful high-magnification binoculars, the agents took up concealed observation posts among the trees and rocks, roughly half a mile from the main ranch buildings. The silence enveloping Quiet Creek was unnatural. No barking dogs, no lowing cattle, no sounds of machinery. Only a thin plume of smoke rose from the main house chimney. Shutters on most windows remained tightly closed. A man sat on the front porch, a rifle across his knees, but he sat motionless, like a statue. "Something's wrong down there," Carter murmured to his second-in-command. "Too quiet. Smells like a hostage situation." We watch. Inside the main house, the atmosphere had reached a breaking point. The criminals were agitated. The lack of outside news, the constant anticipation of pursuit, the strange behavior of the hosts, it was all fraying their nerves. The remaining 7 gunmen, one was still badly wounded lying in a side room, argued more frequently among themselves. The tension was particularly high between the young, abrasive Chucky and Caleb Caldwell. The full moon was tomorrow. Caleb had almost lost control. His irritability had escalated into open defiance. He no longer dropped his gaze when meeting the gunman's eyes, but stared back with poorly concealed hatred and contempt. His physical strength seemed to be increasing with each passing hour. During another work detail outside, Chucky started taunting Caleb again. "What's wrong, kiddo? Still scared? Want to call your mommy?" he drawled mockingly, shoving Caleb's shoulder. Caleb spun around abruptly, his eyes flashing with a yellowish glint in the dim light of the barn where they'd gone for hay. "Get your filthy hands off me," he growled, his voice so low and unfamiliar that Chucky instinctively recoiled. Michael and John, working nearby under the watch of another guard, tensed. "Caleb, calm down," John said firmly. The guard intervened, pulling Chucky away. "Enough, Chucky, don't push it." But the incident hadn't gone unnoticed. Rico, watching from the house window, frowned. He'd seen the strange light in the boy's eyes, the feral readiness to pounce. These Caldwells weren't as simple as they seemed. The previous day, while searching for rope in the large barn, Rico's son, Marco, and another gunman named Luis had stumbled upon a low, sturdy door in the farthest, darkest corner, secured with a heavy padlock. The door clearly led somewhere below ground. Curiosity piqued. They asked Pete, Hank's son, who was with them. Pete stammered, mumbled something vague about an old root cellar, long unused, and quickly led them away. His nervousness and evasive answer only fueled Marco's suspicion. He mentioned it to his father, but Rico, preoccupied with planning, had brushed it off. Meanwhile, Carter's agents continued gathering intelligence. Communicating via secure channel with the sheriff's office in the nearby town of Black Creek, Carter learned more about the Caldwell family. Yes, they'd lived at Quiet Creek Ranch for years, several generations, considered hardworking, honest folk, but extremely private, rarely coming into town, keeping mostly to themselves. The sheriff confirmed no word from them in 3 days, no calls, their truck hadn't been seen. Eliza Caldwell usually called the general store once a week to order supplies, but hadn't called this week. Small details, but they painted an alarming picture. The FBI's suspicions grew stronger. In the kitchen, supervised by one of the gunmen while Eliza prepared dinner. Sarah Caldwell made a desperate attempt. Noticing the guard distracted by something outside, she quickly scribbled help on a paper napkin with a pencil stub and tried to discreetly slip it through a crack beneath the window frame. But the guard turned back at the worst possible moment. He snatched the napkin from her hand, his face contorting in rage. He grabbed Sarah's arm and roughly hauled her out of the kitchen, ignoring her cries and Eliza's protests. He returned alone a few minutes later. The girls locked in her room upstairs. "One more stunt like that and somebody here gets seriously hurt," he snarled at Eliza and John, who had come running at the commotion. Rico, learning of the incident, knew time was running out. The feds had to be close, watching. They couldn't just sit and wait. They had to move. He began formulating an escape plan. Maybe use the hostages as human shields or for negotiation. He needed transportation, the Caldwell's working pickup truck parked in a shed, and a guarantee of safety for Marco. He gathered his men. Stay alert. Feds could show up any minute. Check your weapons. Prepare for a fight. The tension reached boiling point. Night fell on the ranch, thick and starless. Most of the hostages were locked in 2 rooms on the second floor of the main house, guarded by 1 gunman. Downstairs, in the living room, Rico discussed his plan with his 3 most trusted men. The others, including Marco, Chucky, and Luis, waited in a state of nervous anticipation. Curiosity and suspicion, fueled by the Caldwell's strange behavior, and particularly the incident with Caleb, gnawed at Marco. He remembered the locked door in the barn and Pete's evasive answers. Quietly conferring with Chucky and Luis, he suggested checking what lay behind that door. Chucky, still simmering over Caleb and edgy from the overall situation, readily agreed. Luis hesitated but gave in to their pressure. Waiting for a moment when Rico and the others were engrossed in their discussion, the 3 gunmen slipped out the back door and headed towards the massive dark silhouette of the barn. Reaching the far corner, they shone flashlights on the heavy wooden door. The lock was old but sturdy. Luis, the most experienced lockpick in the group, produced a set of tools. After a few tense minutes of silence, the lock clicked open. They carefully pulled the door towards them. Stale, cold air, tinged with a metallic scent, hit their nostrils. A steep wooden staircase led down into darkness. Shining their flashlights, they began to descend. The stairs led into a vast cellar dug out beneath the barn. What they saw made them freeze. The cellar was divided into several sections. In the central area stood large cages welded from thick steel bars. The bars gleamed dully in the flashlight beams, coated with something that looked like silver. Heavy chains, also with a silvery sheen, were bolted to the walls, ending in massive collars. In a corner lay strange implements: tongs, clamps, scalpels of unusual shape, looking more like tools of torture or instruments for a vet working on large animals. The air here was exceptionally cold and smelled of dust, damp earth, and something else. A faint, almost imperceptible odor of old blood and wild beast. The 3 gunmen exchanged uneasy glances, their faces showing confusion and growing alarm. They moved deeper into the cellar. Beyond the cages, they found large industrial refrigerators and several chest freezers humming in the silence. Marco cautiously opened one of the freezers. It was packed solid with frozen carcasses and chunks of raw meat, venison, beef. But some pieces looked strange, hard to identify. In a nearby refrigerator, they found plastic containers filled with a dark, thick liquid resembling blood. Illegible labels were stuck to them. Was it animal blood or human? Beside them stood jars containing bizarre biological specimens floating in murky fluid. The sight was repulsive and chilling. In the final section of the cellar, behind a heavy cloth curtain, they stumbled upon a veritable arsenal, but the weapons were peculiar. Several crossbows with heavy bolts tipped in silver, knives and machetes with broad silver blades, a few antique rifles, modified to fire massive slugs which, judging by nearby ingots and casting tools, were also made of silver. On an old wooden table lay open books and thick leather-bound journals. They were diaries, filled with cramped handwriting and numerous sketches. The drawings depicted wolves, the moon in various phases, humans transforming into beasts, and arcane symbols. Marco's breath caught in his throat. He didn't fully understand what it all meant, but one thing was clear. The Caldwell family were not simple ranchers. They harbored a terrifying secret, and this place was central to it. They had stumbled into the lair of something dangerous, something that required silver cages and silver weapons. Horror mingled with panic. "We got to get out of here, Marco," Chucky whispered, his voice trembling. "These people are freaking psychos. Or worse." "We tell Rico," Marco decided, trying to keep calm. They hurried back up the stairs, locked the door, and rushed back to the house. Chucky was particularly terrified and angry. Fear made him aggressive. When they re-entered the house, the tension was at its peak. Caleb, who had been brought back downstairs with the other men and held in a corner of the living room, sensed their fear and revulsion. The full moon was now very close. His instincts were honed to a razor's edge, his self-control nearly gone. Chucky, agitated by the cellar discovery and his existing animosity, decided to vent his fear on the boy. He walked over to Caleb. "Well now, freak show," he hissed, loud enough only for Caleb to hear. "We know about your dirty little secrets under the barn now. What do you do down there, huh? Eat people? Your little sister one of them too." He deliberately twisted the knife, insulting his family, insulting Sarah. At that moment, Rico was listening to Marco and Luis's frantic, terrified report about the cellar. His face turned ashen. He realized they had walked into a situation far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The hostages were not what they seemed. He spun around sharply at the commotion in the corner where Chucky was provoking Caleb. "Chucky, leave him," Rico shouted. But it was too late. Caleb's eyes blazed with an inhuman fire. A low, guttural growl ripped from his throat. "Shut him up. Get him out of here." Rico roared, seeing Caleb tense, poised to spring, hearing that inhuman growl. A dreadful suspicion about the nature of the Caldwell secret, sparked by Marco's report, was crystallizing in his mind. He couldn't let the boy lose it right here, in a room full of people. "Chucky, take Ramirez, get him to the shed, and make sure he stays quiet till morning. Tie him up tight." It was a fatal mistake, sending Chucky, enraged and terrified, alone with Caleb, who was on the very brink. With a vengeful smirk, Chucky and another gunman, Ramirez, roughly grabbed Caleb by the arms and dragged him out of the house towards a small tool shed standing apart. John and Michael lunged forward, but rifle muzzles forced them back. The shed door slammed shut. Inside it was dark, smelling of earth and old iron. Chucky shoved Caleb hard against the wall. "So, puppy, gonna growl some more for me?" he taunted while Ramirez fumbled for rope. "We'll calm you down now. Tell us all about your little werewolf buddies, huh?" He punched Caleb hard in the stomach. Caleb doubled over, but instead of a cry of pain, a furious snarl tore from his throat. In that instant, something inside him finally snapped. Instinct, fueled by the imminent full moon and the direct threat, overwhelmed human reason. His eyes flared yellow even in the shed's darkness. He straightened with impossible speed. Chucky swung for a second punch, but Caleb caught his arm. The sickening crunch of breaking bone echoed in the quiet. Chucky howled in pain and terror. Ramirez spun around, dropping the rope, instinctively reaching for the pistol on his belt. He wasn't fast enough. Caleb threw Chucky aside like a rag doll and launched himself at Ramirez. The struggle was short and horrifically brutal. Caleb moved with inhuman speed and strength, his fingers morphing into claws that rent flesh, his teeth becoming fangs that sank into Ramirez's throat. Ramirez managed one wild shot. The bullet thudded into the shed wall. A moment later he gurgled and went limp on the dirt floor. Caleb turned to Chucky, who was trying to crawl towards the door, whimpering in agony and fear. Caleb covered the distance in 2 bounds. Another short, savage snarl, and it was over. For several seconds, Caleb stood over the 2 still bodies, breathing heavily, his chest heaving. Blood stained his hands, his face, his clothes. The smell of it was intoxicating and terrifying. The reality of what he'd done began to pierce the red haze of fury. Panic struck with renewed force. He had to run. Primal self-preservation screamed at him to flee. He lunged at the shed's flimsy window, smashed the frame with his shoulder, and scrambled out into the night. He ran without looking back, towards the sanctuary of the forest, away from the ranch, the bodies, the thing he had become. The sounds of struggle and the single gunshot from the shed had not gone unnoticed. Rico sent 2 men to investigate. When they opened the shed door and shone flashlights inside, their faces contorted in horror. They saw the mauled bodies of Chucky and Ramirez and the shattered window. "He's gone! The kid killed him and escaped," one yelled, stumbling out of the shed. Panic instantly gripped the remaining gunmen. They realized one of the hostages, the quiet kid, was a monster capable of killing with his bare hands. Fear mingled with fury. Rico was livid. 2 of his men dead, killed by a captive who was now loose somewhere nearby in the dark. And he knew their secret. "Find him," he ordered. "Search the area." He couldn't have gotten far. But the fear of the unknown was stronger than the command. No one wanted to venture into the dark woods searching for a creature capable of such violence. Rage and terror needed an outlet. Rico turned towards the remaining hostages held at gunpoint in the living room. His eyes fell on Pete, Hank's son, the young ranch hand who stared back with defiance and disgust. "This is your fault. All your damned secrets," Rico snarled. In a surge of fury, needing to intimidate the others and vent his own fear, he raised his pistol and shot Pete point-blank in the chest. Pete collapsed without a sound. Hank let out a choked cry and lunged towards his son, only to be thrown back by a rifle butt. Eliza and Sarah screamed in terror. John and Michael froze, their faces hardening into masks of hatred. A line had been crossed. Blood had been spilled on both sides. The night was far from over. The full moon would rise within hours. The remaining Caldwells and old Hank exchanged desperate, determined glances. There was no point hiding the truth anymore. They would have to fight. The gunmen, terrified, cornered by supernatural horror and the prospect of the FBI's imminent arrival, frantically prepared to defend the house. The huge disk of the full moon slowly climbed above the black serrated line of the distant hills, bathing the valley and Quiet Creek Ranch in cold, spectral silver light. Shadows grew deep and sharp. Every blade of grass, every stone cast its dark twin upon the ground. Inside the main house, the tension reached the point of no return. The 5 remaining gunmen, including Rico and Marco, huddled together in the living room, keeping the 4 hostages, John, Eliza, Michael, and Old Hank, covered. Pete's body lay starkly on the floor, a grim reminder of the captor's brutality and the inevitable reckoning to come. The gunmen whispered nervously, their eyes darting fearfully towards the dark corners of the room, towards the windows beyond which lay the moon-drenched night. They expected an attack from the escaped Caleb, but subconsciously feared something far worse, born from their discoveries in the cellar and the inhuman power the younger Caldwell had displayed. Sarah remained locked upstairs, her quiet sobbing audible through the ceiling. The first shaft of moonlight fell through an unshuttered living room window, touching John Caldwell's face. He froze, his eyes widening. Then a low, guttural moan escaped him, deepening into a snarl. His body began to shudder convulsively. In the same instant, Eliza, Michael, and Old Hank also began to change. The gunman watched, jaws slack, paralyzed by terror. The transformation was monstrous, agonizing, and swift. Bones snapped audibly, reshaping, lengthening, thickening. Muscles bulged beneath skin, tearing clothes. Thick, dark fur sprouted across their bodies. Faces elongated into bestial muzzles, sharp fangs erupting from gums. Fingers spasmed and crooked, nails hardening into long, sharp claws. Within agonizing seconds, where 4 humans had stood, there were now 4 enormous, snarling creatures. Wolfmen, lycans, their eyes burning like red embers in the moonlight, saliva dripping from fanged jaws. Rico was the first to react. Fire. Shoot the things. He screamed, opening up with his assault rifle. The other gunmen followed suit. The living room erupted in the deafening crash of gunfire, the stench of cordite, and the furious roars of the werewolves. Standard caliber bullets tore through fur and flesh, leaving bloody wounds, but failed to stop their charge. Ignoring the pain, the werewolves lunged at their tormentors. The slaughter began. Michael, the largest and strongest of the werewolves, reached the gunman first. A single swipe of his clawed paw took off one man's head. Another gunman tried to strike him with a rifle butt, but Michael bit through the weapon's barrel with powerful jaws and, in the next instant, tore out his throat. John and Hank attacked the remaining men. Their movements were lightning-fast, savage, inhuman. They ripped and bit, claws shredding flesh, fangs crushing bone. Screams of terror and agony mingled with the werewolves' triumphant snarls. The room became a bloodbath. However, the gunmen were armed with automatic weapons and fought back desperately. The barrage of fire took its toll. Old Hank, battling 2 opponents, took multiple bursts to the chest and stomach. He howled, staggered, and collapsed, his massive form twitching, slowly reverting to human shape even in death throes. One gunman, cornered by Eliza in her wolf form, had a silver cross on a thick chain around his neck. In panic, he ripped it off and, using it like brass knuckles, struck the creature across the muzzle. The silver seared flesh. Eliza shrieked in pain and recoiled, giving the gunman a chance to shoot her in the side. Rico, seeing the fight was lost, his men dying one by one in the claws and teeth of these monsters, knew he had to save his son. He grabbed Marco, who had huddled in a corner catatonic with terror. "With me!" Rico yelled, firing his rifle suppressively as he dragged his son towards the back door through the kitchen. The last surviving gunman tried to cover their retreat but was overwhelmed by John's attack. Rico kicked open the back door and shoved Marco out into the moonlit night. "Run! Run to the woods! Hide!" he shouted. He stayed in the doorway, firing back at the advancing werewolves, buying Marco precious seconds. At that moment, a new sound carried from the forest, a long, savage howl. Caleb, having fully transformed in the woods under the moon's influence and drawn by the sounds of battle and the scent of blood, was emerging at the edge of the trees. His heightened senses immediately caught the scent of fear and adrenaline from the fleeing Marco. Primal hunting instinct took over. Forgetting everything but the urge to pursue, the young werewolf launched himself after the cartel leader's son. Inside the house, Michael, having finished off the last resisting gunman, turned towards the doorway where Rico was still firing. He saw his father John and mother Eliza, who, despite her side wound, was still mobile, burst outside, heading into the woods to find Caleb and check the perimeter. Michael realized he could handle the gang leader alone. He advanced slowly towards Rico, his blood-streaked muzzle twisting into a predatory grin. Rico's final battle was just beginning. Agent Carter and his team, deployed in observation posts around the ranch, had heard the single shot from the shed, then shouting, and shortly after moonrise, the eruption of automatic gunfire and inhuman roaring from the main house. All attempts to contact the ranch or get a clear visual through optics failed. Chaos, shadows, and muzzle flashes reigned inside. Realizing the situation was out of control and the hostages in mortal danger, Carter gave the order to breach. Alpha Team, front door entry. Bravo Team, rear entry. Use flashbangs. Execute now. The FBI Hostage Rescue Team, HRT, elite operators clad in heavy body armor and armed with assault rifles, began their advance towards the house under cover of darkness and sparse trees. They expected heavy resistance from well-armed criminals and were prepared for close-quarters combat. The front door was breached with a small-shaped charge. Agents stormed in, tossing flashbang grenades. The deafening bang and blinding flashes would momentarily disorient anyone inside. But as the smoke cleared, the agents froze on the threshold of the living room, stunned by the scene. The room was drenched in blood. Gore splattered the floor and walls, evidence of a ferocious struggle. The mangled, almost unrecognizable bodies of 5 gunmen lay scattered amidst shattered furniture. Weapons lay discarded. The air hung heavy with the smell of blood and gunpowder. In one corner, agents found the body of a young man, Pete, killed by a gunshot to the chest. Near him lay another body, a large, older man, Hank. But something was wrong with his appearance. His features seemed distorted, almost bestial, and patches of thick, dark fur clung to his hands and chest. It was as if he had begun transforming into something else at the moment of death. Bravo Team, bursting in through the back door, heard sounds of struggle and snarling from the kitchen. Moving cautiously forward, they saw, framed in the doorway, an enormous creature covered in dark fur resembling a man-sized wolf, finishing off the last gunman. Rico. The creature raised its bloody muzzle and turned towards the agents, baring its fangs and emitting a low, menacing growl. Its eyes glowed red in the beams of their tactical lights. Unable to believe their eyes, but following protocol when facing an aggressive unknown, the agents opened fire. Bullets slammed into the creature's chest and shoulders. It roared in pain but didn't fall. Instead, it spun and launched itself in an incredible leap through the shattered back door into the yard, vanishing instantly into the night. Control, this is Alpha 1. House is clear. Multiple DBs, confirmed hostiles, appears all accounted for. Also 2 civilian casualties. Encountered, unknown subject extremely aggressive, resembles large animal, possible mutant. Subject is wounded but fled north. Engaging pursuit. The HRT team leader reported into his radio. Carter, receiving the report, issued the order. All teams pursue the subject. Extreme caution advised, creature is dangerous. The FBI agents, shocked by what they had witnessed but obeying orders, plunged into the woods after the wounded Michael. They still didn't understand what they were dealing with, but their training overrode fear and disbelief. Maybe it was some kind of cartel experiment, or an unknown species of predator. Meanwhile, in the woods a few hundred yards from the ranch, Caleb's pursuit of Marco ended. The young werewolf, driven solely by hunter's instinct, easily overtook the teenager frantic with terror. Marco stumbled, fell, and turned to see the nightmarish creature looming over him, eyes burning, muzzle bloody. His scream died almost instantly as Caleb's clawed paw descended. The kill was swift and brutal, underscoring the primal savagery that had consumed the young werewolf in his first full transformation. Shortly after, John and Eliza, also in werewolf form, found Caleb standing over Marco's body. They saw the feral gleam in his eyes, the blood on his muzzle. They knew their son had crossed a line, succumbing to the bloodlust. Just then, Michael, staggering and leaving a trail of blood, burst from the trees, pursued closely by FBI agents. The family, what remained of it, was reunited for a brief, desperate moment in the moonlit forest clearing. They heard the shouts and pounding footsteps of the approaching agents. John looked at Eliza, at Michael, at Caleb. The decision was unspoken, instinctive. They had to lead the pursuit away, protect their kind, their secret. The FBI team, following the noise and Michael's blood trail, burst into the clearing where the werewolves waited. Their flashlights illuminated an unbelievable sight. 4 giant, wolf-like creatures. Before the agents could fully react, the werewolves attacked. A new firefight erupted in the night woods. Agents took casualties. The werewolves were incredibly fast, strong, and used their knowledge of the terrain, striking from the darkness and melting back into the trees. The night forest became a chaotic and lethal battlefield. Muzzle flashes ripped through the darkness, momentarily illuminating furious clashes between FBI agents and werewolves. Bullets whined through the trees, ricocheting off trunks. The agents operated in teams, trying to provide cover fire and aim accurately at the massive figures flitting through the shadows. But the werewolves were too fast, too strong. Standard weapons wounded them, slowed them, but didn't stop them instantly. They attacked from ambush, using claws and fangs with devastating effect. 2 agents from the pursuit team were killed in the first minutes of the engagement, torn apart before their comrades could react. The remaining agents fell back, forming a defensive perimeter, but the werewolves pressed their advantage, circling, waiting for openings to strike again. John Caldwell, fighting alongside Michael and Eliza, saw that there were too many agents, too well armed and organized. They were taking losses, but they kept pushing. Sooner or later, they would corner his family. Michael was wounded in the shoulder. Eliza limped from the gunshot wound sustained back at the house. Caleb, consumed by battle frenzy, fought ferociously but recklessly. And somewhere out there, Sarah might still be hiding. They couldn't let the FBI capture them or learn the full truth. John made his decision. He had to draw them off, give his family a chance to escape. He let out a loud roar, drawing the attention of the main group of agents led by Carter, and bolted in the opposite direction from where he gestured for Eliza, Michael, and Caleb to retreat. The agents, seeing one of the creatures break away, concentrated their fire on it. John, dodging bullets and using trees for cover, led them deeper into the woods. He was hit multiple times but kept running, fighting back, until his strength failed him. In a small clearing, surrounded on all sides by agents, he made his last stand. He lunged at them, knocking them down, shredding body armor with his claws, but the bullets kept finding their mark. Finally, struck by several fatal wounds simultaneously, he collapsed. Carter and his men cautiously approached the downed creature. And then, before their eyes, something impossible happened. The massive, fur-covered body began to shudder, to change. Bones shifted with soft grating sounds. Fur retracted beneath the skin. The bestial muzzle smoothed into human features. Within a minute, lying dead on the forest floor was John Caldwell, owner of Quiet Creek Ranch, his body riddled with bullets. The agent stared in numb horror and disbelief. Carter lowered his weapon. Now he knew. The incredible, monstrous truth lay before him. While the FBI's attention was fixed on John, Eliza, Michael, and Caleb managed to slip away. They vanished into the dense forest, heading further from the ranch, from their pursuers. Perhaps they found Sarah, who might have escaped her room during the chaos of the assault and hidden in the woods. Their ultimate fate remained unknown. Carter ordered an immediate lockdown of a vast area encompassing the forest and the ranch. A meticulous evidence collection began. What they found only confirmed the unbelievable nature of the events. Giant wolf tracks alongside military boot prints, clumps of inhuman fur snagged on branches and barbed wire, casings from standard ammunition, and several strange, heavy silver bullets found embedded in the barn walls and cellar. The cellar itself, with its silver cages, chains, and arsenal of silver weaponry, was irrefutable proof. The bodies of the gunmen bore horrific wounds inconsistent with attacks by known predators. Hank's body never fully reverting to human form. And finally, John Caldwell's body, having transformed before the eyes of a dozen FBI agents. Surviving agents gave confused but strikingly similar accounts of giant wolves, incredible strength and speed, and resistance to gunfire. Carter contacted his superiors in Washington via secure channels. His report was met first with disbelief, then alarm. Given the extraordinary nature of the incident, the high number of FBI casualties, 4 agents killed, several wounded, the complete annihilation of the drug trafficking gang under inexplicable circumstances, and the absolute impossibility of explaining events to the public without causing mass panic, the only feasible decision was made: total classification of the incident. The official story for the press and public was quickly fabricated. During a fierce special operation against a highly dangerous gang of drug traffickers fortified on a remote ranch with hostages, a firefight occurred. As a result, all criminals were eliminated, but tragically the ranch owners were also killed, caught in the crossfire. The FBI also sustained losses. Quiet Creek Ranch and the surrounding forest were immediately declared a biological and chemical contamination zone, allegedly due to a drug lab discovered on site, and closed indefinitely under the pretext of decontamination efforts. In the classified archives of the FBI at Langley, a file stamped Top Secret appeared, codenamed Quiet Creek. It contained agent testimonies, photographs, forensic results, and an analytical report featuring terms like unidentified biological entity, genetic anomaly, and lycanthropy. Unofficial searches for the escaped entities continued for some time by a specialized unit, but yielded no results.